All right, so welcome back to the channel. Had a lot of progress since our last episode. Uh, if you look down inside the wheel well, you will see that I have these lips now permanently bonded. That is where I am going to be picking up for this episode. It is also going to be what I'm going to be focusing on for the how-to for this episode. So now these lips I made several months ago, and I'm actually going to show some of the footage kind of fast forward so that you can see how I made these. In essence, what I did was use some note cards and aluminum tape to make some temporary forms and fiberglass around them. Now, these are very rough right now. We're going to have to do a lot of work with them to get them to the point where we can permanently bond it. So we're going to use this piece, like I said. So we're going to get into the footage of how I made these. And then from there, we're going to get into the step-by-step process of, cutting them out, cleaning them up, shaping them, and actually bonding them. So with saying all that, yeah, let's just get to the video. So here's a look at the lip on the inside of the rear wheel well. And you can see how it covers up everything that we cut. Now these are permanently bonded, and you can see on the inside here where I have right here everything notched. These areas I'm actually going to take down to the base panel so that I can blend them with fiberglass. Now I made these things really thin because I want to add a layer of fiberglass over this to bond the base panel and this together. So the epoxy that I'm using is to bond everything and hold it in place, but it's not necessarily, temporary or permanent. I'm relying on the fiberglass that I'm going to add next to, hold everything in place. So we'll take a look at the other side next. All right, so we have the other section here. You can see at the bottom right here, I'm going to have to extend down a little bit. These pieces, I'm only going to be using probably about that much, all the way down. What I wanted was this nice rolled edge to cover up everything that I cut. It's kind of one of my biggest pet peeves in body kits is when you see the finished product and everything in the wheel well that was cut was left, kind of untouched. Again, this will all be blended. And back in this section here, you can kind of see right here, I'm going to add foam to blend this winglet into this lip. So, we're getting down to the nitty gritty here of the design, and things will start to kind of click and see how everything in these areas will start to flow together. Another thing about making these lips like the way I did was, with all this round bar installed here, this would have been really, really difficult to do. To try and like fiberglass around everything and pop these parts, it could have been done. It wouldn't have been, super dreadful. But for me, it was just simply easier to notch things out, after the fact. I think I can get the top here. Yeah. So again, I'm only worried about here. I'm not worried about everything beyond there. So up in here, I have it so that the OEM fender liner can just actually tuck in behind here. So that's pretty much what we're going to be doing on the front. The only difference is the front does not have an upper section like this because of the hood. It actually has a plastic fender liner that we're going to be able to reuse. So that's pretty much what we're going to be aiming for in this how-to video. So now that you've seen the video of how I made this form, or made the form to make this piece, you kind of understand that I use those note cards as kind of guidelines. And what I've done now is gone back into the fiberglass and traced along that line. And this will be my cut line to trim off all the, excess fiberglass here. So we're going to trim that, and then we're going to clean up the back edge. And then from there, we'll be able to take this and actually figure out where we're going to have to make notches, where we're going to have to cut sections out to make this fit on the cart. So let's go cut it. So now that we've got this thing cleaned up, what we're going to be doing is making some marks. Now, I've made some marks here and here before I was on camera because there was no way you would be able to see what I'm doing, but I can explain it and make my final mark. So basically, what I want is this upper section here to line up in here somewhere. And this lower section just simply has to be notched out. Now, what I have is this piece of round rod in the middle that I have to account for, and that's what I have to notch out so that this thing can actually slide in place. So we're simply going to put this piece in place, and I will mark where the round rod is. I'll transfer that onto the fiberglass, and we'll drill it out, and then we'll see how it fits. All right, so that's all the marks that I need to make on this piece to test fit it. So we'll notch this out, cut everything out, and see how it fits. So after I drill a pilot hole here, all I'm going to do is make some lines that I can use to cut with my cutoff wheel. And that will intersect with the hole. And that will fit around the round rod. And then we just notch stuff out. So I apologize for the terrible camera angle here. There's just really no good way to show this. So I'm basically going to explain what happened here. So I made my initial test fit, which worked out just fine. It sits in place. You can see how this will clean up all the areas that I cut and that were damaged. The problem is, and I knew this going into making these, that there was no way to account for the cut in the fender here. So what I did was basically figured out from this position where this had to go. Now this whole piece has to come up to about right here. And this will align this top edge with the top of the fender in here. So what I'm going to have to do is notch here and make this area opening here larger. This section here and here. That will allow this piece to move up and sit where I want it. So I'll do that. I'm not going to video it. And then we'll come back and take a look at it. So you can see I've notched this thing out to fit the second time. And now it's sitting pretty much where I wanted it. It's sitting tight at the top of the panel here, which I really wanted. I'm only going to be using a small section of this, just enough to cover up the damage that was done. I'm not going to be extending very far in. I'm going to have to make trim panels for here. So, you know, what's beyond here really doesn't matter. It's just this nice little beveled edge that I'm after. So I'm pretty happy with this. We're going to move on to the next step, which is sanding and shaping these things. So that's basically what it took to get this lip to this point. You can see this is the one that I have not worked yet, and there's quite a bit of difference between, you know, the raw fiberglass that hasn't been sanded versus this one that I have worked. You know, I made these things intentionally really thin because I'm going to be bonding these things permanently, and I want to add more fiberglass over them to make them stronger, but I want to do it in such a way that it blends back to the base panel. So, you know, that's why I made these things the way I did. And right now we're going to work on bonding these things. So, well, we're going to just bond this piece in particular. So the next step is going to be putting some spacers on the car. Now I'm going to give myself an 1/8 inch gap behind the lip here to the body so that I can sneak a trim panel. So, you know, that's going to be what I'm going to do next. I'm not going to be able to film that because I'm just going to be in the way. So I'll set those spacers up, and then when I get back, we are going to epoxy this thing and we are going to permanently bond it. Okay, for this step, I am going to have to move pretty quick. This epoxy sets in 5 minutes. So once we actually spread this stuff, we're going to have to hustle to get it on the car, which means I'm going to explain everything really quick and then we're just going to go for it. So like I said, this is JB Weld clear 5-minute epoxy. This is what I'm using to bond all these lips to the base panels. Everything has already been scuffed really good, cleaned really good, both on the car and this surface. I highly suggest you take your time and do that. I harp on it all the time, I know, but it is the biggest thing that I find people lack when it comes to doing composites, and that is just general cleaning before you try and bond materials. So anyway, having said all that, I'm simply going to use a note card here just to spread this stuff out. Just a cheap piece of cardboard left over and a little spreader tool. We're just going to spread this out. I'm going to cut the camera, then we'll be at the car and we are actually going to tape it in place. So yeah, let's get to it. I always love when it's at the end of the bottle. Seems like every time I record, I'm at the end of some bottle. Ten years later. Do. All right. So I usually use a little stick, little piece of bent rod here, just to kind of mix it together. Then I take a piece of note card here. And I'm just going to kind of fold it in. Mix it really good. All right, so what I'm going to be going for is enough of a coat that it will bond everything, but I don't want it like super, super heavy. And the nice thing about this epoxy is it's self-leveling. So you can spread it and kind of, you know, move the piece around and get it to level out on its own. It's not like body filler where you gotta, you know, constantly feather it and feather it. This will just kind of fill in where you need it to go. So I'm just gonna load the edge. Come back through and smooth it out. Go both directions. If I know it's light in spots, just go back in, add more. Not really worried about excess because I have such a gap built in that anything that's left over is just going to kind of fill in and settle. The other thing too is gravity. Once this is in place, it's all kind of going to run downhill as it solidifies. So all right, so that's pretty much that. I'm going to cut the camera and then we are going to bond this. I got the camera on the best angle I could. Hopefully I can catch all this because I only get one chance. So what I'm going to do is simply put this in place. Now I already have my spacer set. I'm simply going to come up to the top here and line this up to where I want it. Now I'm just working around the panel. I can feel I got a really nice tight fit on that. I have these pieces of tape pre-torn just for this. And all I'm going to do now is just tape this thing in place. I do want to make sure that I'm holding it, you know, so that it doesn't move. A little bit awkward trying to do it like this. I'm trying to do it so you can see what I'm doing. Okay. And I know you can't see it on camera, but this fiberglass is so thin that you can actually see it become transparent when it bonds to the fiberglass base panel. So I kind of use that as a good, barometer as to how everything is bonding. And there we have it. Now we are just going to let this sit, and once it's cured, I can pull the tape off and we'll see what it looks like. All right, you can see I've pulled the tape here, and we are good and bonded to the base panel. I also have, let's see, there it is. That is the black plastic trim cover, slash fender liner that goes under the hood. The actual fender liner clips in underneath it. I'm going to be using this section in combination with this to finish off the front end. Now I'm going to have to make a bunch of panels in this area because the fender liner itself will not work. So I'm going to be trimming this again, roughly about here, so that whatever I make, I can just tuck in behind so it looks nice and clean when you look inside the wheel wells. So that's where we're pretty much going to wrap it up for this episode. All in all, this process was pretty smooth. Not a lot that I encountered that I really didn't account for. One thing I can say is when I do a build, I like to pre-plan every step. So when I get into situations like this, putting in a lip like this, while it might not be a big deal, the final product will look, much more finished. It'll look more refined. And, it's just one of those things that I like to do. So a lot of pre-planning, and, this will be a part that I will actually be very proud of. Next up is going to be trimming these. And then we're going to get into blending some of the body with foam that I can, fiberglass. So we're getting down to the nitty gritty here. There's not a whole lot more fab wise that I have to do before we actually get to fiberglass. So, make sure you're checking back. If you like what you see, make sure you subscribe. And as always, thanks for watching.